Progress. I've been on calls with several members of the health department throughout this week to try to decipher what everything means. I know quite a few of you had reached out to me the minute the order came out, and I gave you what I thought my interpretation of the order was, and I couldn't have been more wrong. So for that, I apologize, which is why we wanted to have this webinar so that I could tell you what I have learned. Please remember, I am not the messenger. I did not create this order. Our health department is working in the best interest of public safety, and we know that. And this is something new for all of us. And I know we're all going to not agree on everything that's been put out, but I am going to try to answer the questions, and the health department is willing to speak with you to figure out how we can navigate through these extremely rough waters together. So I'm going to show you the first slide, if you could please advance. This shows you where we are in our current gating criteria. Whoever thought that taking this job, I would have to learn so much about public health and gating criteria. As you can see, we are now in the red in two areas. Number of cases, which is showing a 2-week trend of significantly increased positive cases. We are currently at a 12% positivity rate for the city of Milwaukee. The other area that is in red is testing, which is showing that the absolute number of tests is decreasing. We are in yellow for care, safety, and tracing. For care, that means that between 10 and 20% of hospital patients are COVID related. We have 8 to 28 days of backup PPE for healthcare workers, and 50 to 95% of people who test positive for COVID are reached within 2 days of receiving results. These criteria are reviewed on a weekly basis by the health department. Every Thursday they review, and that's when they decide whether or not a new order needs to come out. Like I said, you can go to the next slide, please. After speaking with both Interim Health Commissioner Marlena Jackson and Deputy Commissioner of Environmental Health Claire Evers, they feel that this order is in the best interest of public safety. They are working to make sure that they're keeping all of our citizens safe. They do feel that the source of the increased number of cases come from gatherings, large gatherings. So let me cover the key points. Seating is now required in all bars, restaurants, and other venues. You cannot walk around except to come and go or use the restroom. And while you are doing that, you still need to be wearing a mask. All indoor public and private gatherings are limited to 10 people, and that is a 25% of capacity for retail and grocery stores, which are singled out. All outdoor public and private gatherings are limited to 25 people, and you must also be seated at an outdoor gathering as well. Religious ceremonies are limited to 100 people, and this includes weddings and services, and they must also include seating. And the religious ceremonies are covered under the First Amendment protected gatherings, and those are also limited to 100 people. We've asked if there was a reasoning behind the number 100. I was on a call with a significant number of our theater groups where that question was posed, and I have to tell you, I'm not exactly sure of the reasoning behind the number of 100. So if you do have questions on that, feel free to reach out, and we will send out this with the email address that you can address your questions to. Dance floors are now prohibited. That's in any private event space as well as in bars and restaurants. This means if you have a dance floor that is permanent, it's probably in your best interest to rope it off, to put chairs around it, something that shows that it is not in use. I do know that the health department is going to be out this weekend, and they are going to be going to bars to make sure there is compliance. So I would certainly make sure that you have read this, and that if there's something you don't understand, that you are absolutely asking the question to make sure that you're in compliance. Wedding receptions are limited to 10 people inside and 25 people outside, and that must include seating. Bars and restaurants, This is the one that I think is the most confusing to most people on this phone call. Bars and restaurants with a current approved COVID safety plan can operate at a full capacity according to their plan. Now, first of all, let me explain what full capacity means. Every restaurant and bar that submitted a safety plan had to ensure that they were following a 54-point safety plan. That safety plan included physical distancing amongst tables, where staff was going to go, certain ways in, certain ways out. There is no way that any restaurant or bar that's currently operating that's following the 54-point plan can operate at 100%. Most restaurants that I've spoken to are operating at anywhere from 50 to 60% capacity based on the plan that is put in place. So even though it says full capacity, I need everyone to understand it's certainly not at full capacity. Now, when you look at what the health department sent out as businesses that had approved safety plans, some of those businesses were hotels. Some of them were event venues. Some of them were other places of amusement. Unfortunately, from both Claire and Commissioner Jackson, I have specifically heard that those are not included in the right to operate at full capacity. They are limited to the public gatherings portion, which is a maximum of 10 people. I know this is confusing and it isn't logical to a lot of you because you may have an event space that's 9,000 square feet and you want to put 100 people in there, and that absolutely does fit within what the plan that you submitted allows, but I am being told that that is not what is being allowed at this point. That being said, we understand that this is very new news and it came out on Monday and was to go into effect yesterday. And there is something called prosecutorial question, where if you have something that is on the lower end and practicing exactly the measures you need to practice right now in order to get through this weekend to make sure that you can start to follow this order as you move forward, you may want to consider figuring out how you can do that. Again, masks are required in every single one of these instances, and there are no dance floors. So if you're on this call and you're not in the city of Milwaukee, there has been a new order that, I'm sorry, not a new order, but some new guidelines that the city has put out. I'm sorry, that the municipalities has put out, and I'm just trying to look it up here. So all of the different municipalities gathered together, and I'm going to ask Kristen to chime in because she's much more in tune with this because she was reading it last night as I was going through our order to make sure I understood our order. But they are putting some guidelines in place to try to also mitigate the risk, because we all know that if you can only go to a bar here and be seated, and if you can go 5 minutes down the road, what good is that doing to help make sure that as a community, as a region, we're all trying to maintain safety? So the municipalities have moved to phase B, and phase B says that gatherings in homes and public venues is limited to 10 people maximum. Retail establishments are at 25% maximum, and restaurants and bars have gone from 75% capacity back down to 50% capacity. Salon and spa services are at 25%, and places of public amusement, including gyms and fitness centers, are also at 25%. In the order for the city of Milwaukee, museums and places of amusement are following public gatherings, which means they are at a maximum of 10 people indoors and 25 people outdoors. Again, I understand that some of our museums have thousands upon thousands of square feet, and I know that there have been different groups lobbying the health department to make sure their voices are heard. And I would urge you to consider doing that and continue doing that, so that when it is safe for us to again begin to reopen, when we're seeing a significant trend in downward cases, that when we reopen, everyone, every sector can open with a plan that they can be held accountable to as we continue to move forward. Again, hotels, venues, attractions, places of public amusement are included in the indoor and outdoor gathering limit, not in the bar and restaurants. That's the gist of the plan. That is what we're currently facing. Obviously, it is my job to make sure that I'm continuously having conversations and advocating for a safe opening of our tourism ecosystem. Each of you are incredibly important. And as we know, as we begin to come out of this, and as we continue to have to coexist with the virus, which we absolutely will have to do, is coexist with the virus. There is not an end in sight at this point. Making sure that we're all constantly talking and working together to make sure that we can show everyone how safe we can be. Milwaukee is still significantly lower than the rest of the state in number of cases. However, we have seen a significant increase over the last 2 weeks, which is the reason for the change and the reason for the implementation of 4.2. I'm going to open it up to questions, and we may repeat some of these things because they may come in different ways, and I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity to voice your questions, and then I'll give you an answer, and if I can't answer it, I will certainly make sure that we reach back out to this entire group that's on this call right now with the email addresses of who you can reach out to answer those questions. So Kristen, I would ask you to come back on and let me know what questions we have.
Peggy, that's a great lead. And the first question that we actually have is, who should we reach out to at the health department for additional guidance? Yes,
there's an email address that we will publish, and I don't know if we can publish it in the chat that you can all see. It is a general mailbox, and they are getting back to people rather quickly. I know that some of the questions I received at the beginning, I was answering, and they were also talking to the health department. And then if you have a question about the legalese of the order, and I know this has come up, that it seems as though if you had a submitted plan, regardless of whether you were a bar and a restaurant, that you should be included. They've also given us the attorney, the city attorney, who you can reach out to have that discussion as well.
Okay, we're going to go down the list. This is in the order that they're appearing. So thanks to everyone who is submitting questions and has already submitted questions. For our open to the public restaurant spaces, our bars can still allow guests to come to the bar and sit socially distanced. For example, is seated at a table, meaning can we sit at the bar?
It does say that seating is required. So I believe as long as they have a seat and it is socially distanced according to your plan, they are allowed to sit at a bar. And I believe that you have to have plexiglass in between the bar and the patrons, or the patrons and the bartenders. But I will definitely write that question down, and we will send you a response after I know that Claire is on a call until 10:30 this morning, and then we were going to reconnect with any questions that I could not answer. So we will definitely send that out.
For wedding receptions in a space with an approved plan, can a served station exist?
If you are a wedding venue and not a restaurant, you cannot have a wedding unless it's under 10 people or it's outside and under 25 people. And I did specifically ask the question about buffet type or station type serving. It needs to be served by a server. You cannot have people going up to the station and coming back to their table. The server has got to do it. So if you wanted to have a station in the room where they were preparing it and the server was bringing it back based on what they ordered, you could do that, but you could not have people going to the station.
Does Order 4.2 supersede the COVID plan submitted to the city of Milwaukee? And what about private events being held at hotels?
It does. 4.2 is not allowing the hotels who have approved plans to host any event over 10 people.
Regarding
restaurant, sorry, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Unless it's in their restaurant. So if you're a hotel like the Westin and Stella has an approved plan, you can host an event in Stella. If you're the Kimpton and you have an event for Trey Rivali, you can do it in Trey Rivali. If you're the Pfister, you can do an event in Mason Street Grill. You cannot do it in the meeting space of the hotel.
Regarding art galleries, what does the health department recommend? Do visitors need to be seated since they cannot walk around?
You are limited to 10 people, and the seating is required in bars, restaurants, and venues. So in an art gallery, the most you could have in your space at any given point is 10 people, and they would have to follow proper spatially distancing. So they would not have to be seated.
Are gyms and fitness centers exempt from the 10-person limit as long as they follow the 1 person per square foot rule?
I'm not ignoring you. I'm looking right now because I don't remember seeing anything about gyms in the order at all.
I can do some research on the back end here and get an answer, but
Yeah.
the thing I think it's important to remember for everyone is that the purpose of this order is to stop gatherings. So if your event or business is creating a gathering, that's what the health department is trying to limit.
So I mean, the logical part of me would say for gyms, that as long as they're not gathering, it's not a group exercise class. I'm assuming group exercise classes would have to stop. But if someone's on a treadmill and right now the gyms that I've seen, every single piece of equipment, every other one is X'd out, I would think that you would still be able to operate at 25% occupancy with the physical distancing. But we will definitely get clarification on that and send that to you after I speak with Claire this morning.
And to clarify the order, wedding ceremonies are allowed, but receptions are not.
To clarify, religious wedding ceremonies are allowed up to 100 people, and they must be physically distanced. So your chairs would have to be 6 feet apart.
And what about the reception?
No receptions, unless it's 10 people or unless it's a small number of people that fit within your restaurant plan.
Here's a sports question. We have events planned in the convention center in Q1. How are sporting events dealt with in the order?
So right now, they have not addressed tournament sporting. They've only addressed sporting within high schools and clubs that are on an ongoing basis. After asking this specific question, because we want this to happen in January, obviously we're still 3 months away, and I know there's planning that needs to happen, and we want this to happen for our entire downtown area because it will create some much needed business. We have asked that we can continue to meet with the health department and talk about what we need to do and where the cases are so that we can put a plan in place specifically to address these. Right now, what Claire said was that you would have to be tested prior to the start of the convention. So you would have to require every player to be tested if it were to happen next week, because what they're making high school sports do is test every 3 days. So if you're hosting a 3-day tournament, which is a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or just a Saturday, Sunday, they would have to do a test prior to the start of the tournament. And right now, they would not allow anyone in the space besides the coaches and the players, no additional fans. 4.1 did allow for fans, and we'll hopefully get back there by putting these measures in place, and then we can discuss that as well.
Does the outdoor gathering restriction apply to drive-through events?
It does not apply to drive-through events, only to drive-in events, where there's gathering. So drive-through events, as long as people are not getting out of their cars, are fine.
Do any of these orders apply to numbers of employees gathered in a workplace setting?
Okay, I'm gonna come back to that question. I have health department people on the phone who just sent me an email. So gym and fitness centers shall be allowed to open subject to physical distancing and protective measure requirements. They shall follow all restrictions applicable to businesses falling into subsections 2E. That's a lot of, yeah. So I'm reading this. So you are allowed to stay open. There is physical distancing and protective measure requirements, but I have to go back and read 2E, G, and H so that I can understand that. All right. So the next question was, I'm sorry, can you repeat it, Kristen?
Do any of these orders apply to the numbers of employees gathered in a workplace setting?
So we were told specifically, if you have 20 people and you want to have a meeting within your personal offices, you can do that. You just need to make sure that you're following proper physical distancing guidelines and wearing masks at all times. But that does not, this order does not say that you cannot have that meeting in person.
Have they given any indication as to how long this might be in effect?
They reevaluate the gating criteria on a weekly basis, like I said, on Thursdays. They will need to see a 2-week trend. A trend is 2 weeks, and they'll need to see a decrease for 2 weeks in a row in order to lift 4.2. And I don't know if they'll go back to 4.1 or if they'll create a 4.3.
And just to confirm, places with food and wait staff must serve tables, and bars must also serve tables as well, correct?
Correct. What they are trying to do is prevent people from gathering. So if you walk into a bar, and even though you have a seat, sometimes you may go up to the bar to get a cocktail. That is no longer allowed. Now, what you can do, and this is some suggestions that were offered by Claire, you can create some sort of online QR ordering system where then you can just have either the bartender, it doesn't need to be a server, bring the drinks out. You are required to not allow people to gather at the bar to get a drink.
And we have a couple questions here about museums and attractions and retail. So could you just reiterate those numbers, please?
Yes. Retail is 25% of your capacity. What was the next one?
Like museums and attractions.
Museums and attractions are a maximum of 10 people at this point.
And that does not include employees?
It does not include employees, no.
If you have an approved COVID plan, can you have a cocktail reception outside?
As long as people are seated. At 25 people.
Peggy, do you have any information about the criteria to issue an order like this with little to no notice?
I don't. I would urge you to contact the health department. We all know that the order to open restaurants happened on a Thursday for a Friday. So this is not the first time it's happened. I know that our public health officials are working night and day to make sure that the citizens of the city of Milwaukee are safe. And although this is obviously not the best case scenario for any of our businesses, they felt it was pertinent to put it into place as soon as possible. I would assume with the Halloween holiday coming up, this is notoriously a very large weekend in terms of people celebrating. And with the extra hour that we get by falling back with our clocks, that they wanted to make sure that there were some guidelines in place for this weekend so that we didn't see large events taking place where there could be the potential for more spread.
Will retailers be given an opportunity to apply for a COVID safety plan?
So at this point, I've heard several times from Commissioner Jackson that the only thing she's going to do is go backwards at this point based on where we are with the current positivity rate. But in speaking with the health department, they do know that we eventually want to get to a place where there's sector-specific plans so that people can be open and more businesses, more types of businesses can do what the restaurant and bar industry did with their 54-point safety plan. And that is definitely something that the health department is amenable to.
Okay. What about smokers outside of a bar? Do they have to be seated?
That is so no, because you're not, if you're not serving them, just like if they had to wait outside, they do have to practice physical distancing, but you're not holding an event outside, so no, they do not have to be seated.
And just to clarify, for weddings, does it have to be a religious wedding or can it be any wedding?
What is covered under 4.2 says religious wedding.
Does that need to be in a house of worship or can an event space host a wedding?
An event space can host a wedding. And I would assume, just based on, you know, being in the events world for so long of my career, even when you have an officiant, they bring in some sense of faith. So I would assume that most weddings would be considered faith-based, so you could have a ceremony of up to 100 people.
We have a couple hotel capacity questions. Can you explain, hotels are limited to 50% capacity. Does that mean total people in-house or number of rooms sold?
That is the capacity of your entire hotel. Thank you to Colin Walsh nearly 6 months ago for helping me with this one from the Hyatt. Your hotel capacity is a number that is on your certificate of occupancy license, and it's 50% of that. Therefore, if you can have 1,200 people and you have 400 rooms, your occupancy is 600 people. If you sell all 400 rooms, you just need to make sure that you have some single occupied rooms and some double occupied rooms. If I had a whiteboard right now, I would do it because it's easier to see with the math, but it is based on your capacity, not your number of rooms.
We have several questions here regarding whether or not employees are included in the 10 or 25% total.
I do not believe that they are included. It said, it's exclusive of employees.
How does this order affect early voting or voting on election day?
I don't think I understand that question. Right now, voting I've seen the voting, the early voting here, and they have little markers where you stay 6 feet apart. I'm sure they're going to hold people at the door, so there's no more than 10 people in the voting place at a time, so that they're complying with the 4.2.
And you said that they look at the gating criteria on a weekly basis. So the soonest this will be rolled back is 1 week?
I'm sorry?
You said that they look at the gating criteria on a weekly basis. The soonest this will be rolled back is 1 week?
No, they need to see a trend, a downward trend. And I asked that question, hoping that that could be the case, but a trend would be 2 weeks.
Given the obvious inequality of this rule, will the health department be reviewing this and considering a change in the next month?
I can't answer that question for them. I know that we have, not just me, several different business sectors have asked that question. I think at this point, if we continue to see the surges that we're seeing, that that won't happen right now, but it will happen once we start to see a flattening of the increased number of cases.
Can you talk a little bit about how hotel food accommodations factor into this new policy? What changes do hotels need to make with their food policies?
I guess that would depend on if you have restaurants. You know, obviously this is basically saying that no gatherings are allowed in your hotels. So whether it be a 25-person business meeting, a 30-person cocktail reception, you are limited to 10 people. If you have a meeting that is 10 or less people in your hotel, it would probably be in the best interest to do things where you are absolutely being served. Whether it be a box lunch that they can pick up as they're walking away, if they're not going to eat in the room. If they are going to eat in the room, you'd be delivering the box lunch.
Peggy, you mentioned earlier that the health department will be walking around this weekend, making sure people are compliant. Currently, there are only 4 health inspectors. Has the health department received additional funding that has allowed them to hire additional inspectors?
I don't know the numbers. We asked specifically the question on one of the calls. They could not answer it. I don't know how many will be out, but I was told that they will be out looking, and that is at bars and restaurants because they were the ones who were allowed to stay open. So that's what I know at this point.
Are ticketed tours excluded from the walking around rule?
That is a really good question. I will have to get back to you on that. I would assume if it's under 10, you're fine because you're outdoors and you're not staying in any one place. And I know that most of the tour operators that I've seen do tours here are practicing social distancing and using microphones so that they can be heard and wearing masks at all times. So I would like to think that it would be okay, but I will get some clarification on that point. I just got a question as well about preventing gatherings in hotel lobbies. And I think that it is really incumbent on the staff of the hotel to make sure that they are not gathering in large groups, or if they're in groups of 10, that they are seated. And if there is 20, that they are seated 10 and 10 away from each other. You know, just making sure. And like I said, there is prosecutorial discretion. So, you know, as you walk through, you can't control as the hotelier the actions of other people, just as long as you're trying to make sure that they're compliant, you're having those conversations, you're letting them know this is in the best interest of public safety, and doing your best to make sure that they are separating and not gathering in large groups.
If you are a place of public amusement, also with a restaurant on site and a retail space, is the capacity 10 people plus the approved restaurant capacity with the COVID plan and the retail capacity added together?
I think that that's one you would have to call specifically. I know that there is definitely some that they have to look at differently in terms of how they're counting it. I would say if it's something like, I'm going to give an example of the Harley Museum where the retail is separate, that would be limited to 10 people. The museum would be limited to 10 people, but motor would be based on the plan. If everyone's familiar with that, I'm just trying to give you a visual of what that would look like. If they're all in one place, I think you really need to reach out to the health department with that question, because I know that they're having specific conversations about places that are very unusual.
We have a couple private dining room questions here. Does the private dining room follow the restaurant safety plan, or is it considered a private event space with no more than 10?
Nope, it follows the restaurant plan at this point. We specifically asked that question with specific examples. So your private dining room, as long as they are socially distanced and it's big enough to cover what you have in that room, you are allowed to use your private dining room.
Here's a question. Our bar is covered with plexiglass, does not have seats, and is set up for single file walk up ordering. How is it safer for our bartender to take an order to a table?
I pretty sure I know who that is, and I understand, and I totally agree with you. And I have brought this up in question. At this point, they are sticking because they can't build a plan, is what they told me, for individual businesses. They have to build a plan for everyone. And because the issues of gathering typically take place at bars, even though the businesses I know that are doing this are very, very safe, they are saying that that's still not allowed.
What actions can bars and restaurants take when they see other bars and restaurants in violation of 4.2?
You know, obviously we hope that all of our bars and restaurants are being safe and paying attention to the plans that they submitted and that they are working in good faith with trying to help stop the spread of COVID-19. But I know that the health department is getting calls all the time with pictures. They cannot issue a citation from pictures, but they have made the commitment, if they do get a picture with a bar name that is not following the rules, they will send someone out the next day or the next weekend, whatever comes first.
How does this affect public transit?
I believe public transit has been following physical distancing, and I don't think they're allowing more than 10 people on their buses right now anyway. I don't think they are. But I would assume that they would also be limited to 10 people.
Do you have to resubmit COVID safety plans with 4.2 in consideration?
I am not aware of anyone being asked to do that. If you have currently submitted a COVID safety plan and have not gotten approval from the city of Milwaukee, then you are only allowed as a restaurant or bar to operate at 25%. That is the change. Originally, before this, you were able to operate at 50% without it. It has now gone down to 25%. And they are behind in being able to approve some of these plans at this point.
Earlier, you said drive-through events were permitted, but drive-in events were not. Can a drive-in event occur if people aren't permitted to get out of their cars?
Yes.
Okay. We still have them coming in. Just to clarify, how much of 4.2 will affect non-city of Milwaukee locations?
4.2 is only for the city of Milwaukee. It is an order by our health department. The county does not have a health department. And there is a coalition of suburban Milwaukee counties, and they have written letters. I've seen one of them that talks specifically about how they need to follow these guidelines, but they are only guidelines. They are not a mandate like in the city of Milwaukee.
Peggy, do you have any insight as to how bars and restaurants were deemed to be essential businesses?
I don't think they were deemed to be essential businesses. At least I've not heard that. I think what happened was there was a working group that worked with the health department upon reopening to make sure that restaurants and bars were behaving in a very safe manner, where the 54-point plan came into being. As someone whose job is to promote tourism in the city, I was very happy with this because this allowed us to be able to talk to potential tourists and say that our bars and restaurants were operating at a much higher level than in other cities because they were being forced to adhere to this 54-point plan. It is a very extensive plan. A lot of bars and restaurants have put significant money into making sure that they could follow these guidelines. So that is where I think that it started. And obviously, I don't know. I mean, we all knew, we've all heard that there was going to be a surge in the fall, but I think we had all gotten so used to being able to operate the way we were operating that I don't know that they thought about adding other sectors to those safety plans.
Have health department officials factored in that people can Uber 5 minutes away and not have any restrictions whatsoever?
They have. I've brought that up, which is why they said that the suburban Milwaukee cities have all agreed to going back to phase B, which they haven't been in phase B since June. So it is that, you know, it's somewhat similar to what 4.2 is, but it is just a guideline.
Do you have any information about MPD being used this weekend to enforce 4.2? Has MPD been trained or empowered to enforce?
I don't know that question. I, like most people on this call, listened to Tom Barrett on the Newsmaker luncheon, Mayor Barrett, and I don't know that they're using the police, and the health commissioner did not, I don't believe I got an answer from the health commissioner either. It's something we can look at. But I know that I don't believe that they're able to issue the citations. I think only the health department can issue the citations.
Okay, a lot of these questions that we have left actually touch on the slide that you have up right now. So, oh, here's a new one. When you mentioned that phase B is a guideline and not a mandate, can you clarify?
Yeah, I don't think that any of the cities within the county outside of Milwaukee have ever issued mandates. If you remember, there's a statewide mask mandate that is in effect until November 6th, I believe, or is it November 21st? Kristen, can you refresh my memory?
The mask mandate currently is in effect until the 6th.
Right, so there's a statewide mask mandate, but everything the cities have put out have been guidelines, not mandates. So there is no one in Greenfield, Franklin, Oak Creek out enforcing these mandates at this point, as far as I'm aware.
A lot of the questions, Peggy, touch on the talking points that are currently on the slide that you have up right now. So can you just talk through these one more time? We're getting a lot of capacity questions, a lot of private events, where can weddings be held, that sort of thing. So if you could just talk through these talking points one more time.
Sure. So again, seating is now required in all bars, restaurants, and other venues. You cannot walk around indoors except to come and go or use the restroom. All indoor public and private gatherings are limited to 10 people, except in the exception of retail and grocery stores, which is 25% of that location's capacity. All outdoor public and private gatherings are limited to 25 people, and they must be seated. Religious ceremonies are limited to 100 people, which includes wedding ceremonies and services, and they must include seating. And religious ceremonies fall under the First Amendment protected gatherings, which also include the right to protest, which would also be under the 100-person gathering number. Dance floors are prohibited in all locations. It is in your best interest, if you are a bar, to rope it off if it's permanent or put seating on it so that people aren't using it for the purpose it was intended, which is dancing or gathering. Wedding receptions are limited to 10 people inside and 25 people outside, and again, must include seating. Bars and restaurants with a current approved COVID safety plan can operate at full capacity according to their plan. That is just bars and restaurants. That is not hotels. That is not private venues. That is not attractions. Those are included in the indoor and outdoor gathering limit numbers. which is 10 and 25. Gathering at a bar to order a drink is not allowed. You must have a cocktail server that is absolutely serving those people. And I think that was it. Can you go back one second? I think I caught all of them. And then if you do not currently, as a restaurant or bar, have an approved COVID safety plan, you are subject to 25% capacity in your bar or restaurant. And I think that that is all of them. That means that museums can only have 10 people at a time. That means that any public attraction, indoor space where people typically gather in larger groups are limited to 10 people. I know this is ever changing, and we're trying to keep you up to date, which is why we did this call. I thank you for taking time out of your busy morning to listen to us. I understand that this is confusing and it's difficult. It's confusing and difficult for everyone. None of us have ever been through a pandemic before, and none of us have ever had to live through this at this point. And I want you to know that we are doing our best to keep you informed and to advocate on your behalf. We really do understand how important businesses are in the city of Milwaukee, and we want us all to be able to come through this on the other side stronger and together. We do have a page on our website right now. It is visitmilwaukee.org/reopening-FAQs, so that you can go there and make sure that you're looking at these questions. We'll update this. Those of you whose questions we didn't answer, I had people on the call taking notes. We will send you emails with the answers to those questions regarding tours, regarding gyms. I'll get some specifics on that so that you are kept in the loop. And I do hope that you all stay safe. I hope that you are able to have a good weekend. Here is the email address to email Claire. It's not actually Claire. This goes to the health department, where they have a stable full of people who can answer your questions. And specifically, if you have legal questions, forward those to me and I'll forward you the city attorney's email address as well. Again, I appreciate all your time this morning, and I hope that we were able to provide some clarity. And for those of you who are joining us at 10 o'clock, I feel like Hoda, I'll see you on our second hour. Thank you very much.